The sun had not yet risen over the military base, but the air was already thick with the smell of diesel, sweat, and unspoken tension. The base was a sprawling grid of gray tents, armored vehicles, and watchtowers, nestled in a hostile corner of a country that had known little but conflict for decades. Among the hundreds of soldiers, one name was whispered with a mix of respect and unease: Commander Rohan. He was a man built from battle scars and barked orders, a man who believed that discipline was not a value but a weapon, and he wielded it like a blade. For 3 years he had run this base with an iron grip, and no one had ever dared to challenge his authority. That was about to change, because of her. Her name was Lieutenant Aliyah. She was not tall, nor particularly broad-shouldered, but there was something about her posture that made people look twice. She had arrived at the base 6 months ago, fresh from the academy, with a mind sharper than any bayonet and a quiet resolve that unnerved the older soldiers. Aliyah was a signals officer, responsible for the communication lines that connected the base to command headquarters. In a war where a single broken radio could mean the difference between a successful mission and a massacre, her role was more vital than most understood. She worked in a cramped, windowless bunker, surrounded by humming machines and flickering screens. But her true battle was not fought with codes and frequencies. It was fought in the mess hall on the parade ground, and in the narrow corridors where men like Commander Rohan ruled without question. From her first day, Aliyah had sensed the commander's hostility. He did not like women on his base. He had made that clear in a meeting her second week, when he had thrown a clipboard across the table and snarled that female soldiers were a distraction and a liability. Aliyah had said nothing. She had simply picked up the clipboard, noted the error in his logistics report, and corrected it in front of the entire staff. The room had gone silent. Rohan's face had turned the color of a bruised plum, but he had said nothing. From that moment, a silent war began between them. He would assign her the worst shifts, cut her rations, and invent extra duties. She would complete each task faster and better than anyone expected. He tried to break her spirit through isolation, ordering other soldiers not to share meals or conversation with her. Aliyah ate alone, but she ate with her back straight and her eyes clear. She wrote long letters to her younger sister every night, describing the stars above the desert, never mentioning the coldness inside the base. The other soldiers watched this battle with a mix of fear and fascination. Most stayed silent, unwilling to risk Rohan's wrath. But a few, like the elderly medic, Dr. Faisal, would occasionally slip her an extra biscuit or a kind word. "Be careful," he whispered once. "The commander has crushed better men than you." Aliyah had smiled thinly and replied, "Then he should be ready for something different." The tension built like static electricity before a storm. Everyone felt it. The cooks dropped their eyes when she entered the mess. The guards on the gate hesitated before saluting her. Rohan, meanwhile, grew more aggressive. And he began to publicly mock her in front of the troops, calling her princess and the signal girl. He mocked her uniform, her walk, her way of speaking. Aliyah absorbed every insult without flinching. She had learned long ago that silence could be a fortress, but she also knew that fortresses, no matter how strong, are eventually tested. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. It was a day like any other on the base, hot, dusty, and filled with the constant thrum of generators. Aliyah had just finished a 16-hour shift, her eyes burning from staring at screens, her fingers raw from patching frayed cables. She had successfully rerouted the entire communication network after a sandstorm had knocked out the main satellite link. It was a feat that should have earned her a commendation. Instead, as she walked across the parade ground towards her tent, she heard a voice like gravel being crushed under a boot. "Lieutenant, halt!" Commander Rohan strode towards her, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. Behind him, a cluster of soldiers had gathered, sensing the familiar thrill of an impending confrontation. Aaliyah stopped and turned. She saluted crisply. Rohan did not return the salute. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw tight. He had been drinking, she realized. It was not allowed, but no one would ever report him. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he spat, stepping close enough that she could smell the liquor on his breath. "Rerouting the network without my permission. That is insubordination." Aaliyah kept her voice level. "Sir, with respect. The protocol for a communications failure allows the senior signals officer to act without delay. I followed the manual to the letter." The soldiers behind Rohan shifted uncomfortably. They knew she was right. Rohan knew it too. That only made him angrier. "You followed nothing," he growled. "You are a cancer on this base. You undermine my authority every chance you get." Aaliyah did not respond. She had learned that arguing with an angry man was like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Her silence, however, was the worst possible response. Rohan saw it not as restraint, but as defiance. His hand shot out before his mind could catch up. He grabbed a fistful of her long black hair, which she usually kept tied in a tight bun. Today, a few strands had escaped. He yanked hard, twisting her head to the side. A collective gasp went through the watching soldiers. No one moved. No one spoke. For a long, terrible second, the entire base seemed to hold its breath. Aaliyah felt the sharp sting in her scalp, the pull against her neck. She had been hit before, in training, in the chaos of a riot drill. But this was different. This was a commander attacking a subordinate, a man attacking a woman in full view of everyone. The humiliation was designed to be complete. Rohan leaned in close, his voice a venomous whisper. "You are nothing," he said. And then, Aaliyah responded. In the stunned silence that followed the commander's violent act, Aaliyah did not scream. She did not cry. She did not try to pull away or strike back. Instead, she did something that no one on that base had ever seen before. She smiled. It was not a smile of fear or madness. It was a slow, deliberate smile, like a chess player who has just seen the winning move. The soldiers watching felt a chill run down their spines, even in the desert heat. Commander Rohan, still gripping her hair, blinked in confusion. He had expected tears, pleas, or perhaps a violent struggle. He had not expected this. "Let go of my hair, Commander," Aaliyah said. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. "You are making a very serious mistake." Rohan's grip tightened instead of loosening. "Mistake?" He laughed, a harsh barking sound. "The only mistake I made was letting you set foot on my base." Aaliyah tilted her head as much as the grip on her hair would allow and looked him directly in the eye. "There are 17 witnesses behind you," she said quietly. "And one of them, Private Kareem, is holding a phone. He is recording this." Rohan's face went pale. He glanced over his shoulder. Sure enough, young Private Kareem, a lanky soldier with a terrified expression, had his phone out, the red recording light blinking. Kareem had not planned to film. It was an instinct, a young man's way of protecting himself in a world where power could turn violent without warning. But now, that phone was a loaded weapon. Aaliyah continued, her voice still soft but carrying clearly in the silence. "You can break my bones, Commander. You can court-martial me. You can send me to the worst outpost in this country. But you cannot make that video disappear. It will go to the press. It will go to the Ministry of Defense. Your career, your pension, your reputation, they will all burn." Rohan's hand began to tremble. He was a man accustomed to fear, but only as something he inflicted on others. He had never felt it crawl up his own spine like a cold spider. He looked at Aaliyah's face again, searching for a crack, a sign of bluff. He found none. Her eyes were not angry. They were pitying. That was somehow worse. "What do you want?" he hissed through clenched teeth. Aaliyah reached up very slowly and placed her hand over his. Her touch was light, almost gentle. "I want you to let go of my hair," she said. "And then I want you to walk away. We will forget this happened. For now." Rohan's fingers uncurled, one by one, as if they were moving through thick mud. He released her. Aaliyah stepped back and smoothed her hair, tucking the loose strands behind her ear. She did not rub her scalp or show any sign of pain. That would have been a weakness, and she would not give him that. And the commander stood there, breathing heavily, his face a mask of fury and shame. He looked at the watching soldiers, at Kareem's phone, at Aaliyah's composed face. Then, without another word, he turned on his heel and walked away. His strides were long and fast, but they were not the strides of a victor. They were the strides of a man fleeing a battlefield he had already lost. The moment he disappeared into his office, the tension on the parade ground broke like a snapped wire. Soldiers began to murmur, shifting from foot to foot. Some looked at Aaliyah with new respect. Others looked away, ashamed of their own silence. Private Kareem lowered his phone, his hand shaking. "Ma'am," he stammered, "what should I do with the video?" Aaliyah looked at him for a long moment. "Keep it safe," she said, "but do not share it. Not yet. A weapon is most powerful when no one knows you have it." That night, Aaliyah sat alone in her tent, writing a letter to her sister. She did not mention the incident. Instead, she wrote about the way the moonlight turned the sand into a silver sea. But her hand was not entirely steady. For all her calm exterior, she was afraid. She knew that Rohan would not forget this humiliation. A man like him did not retreat. He regrouped. She had won a battle, but the war was far from over. She also knew that her response, shocking as it was, had bought her something precious: time. In the days that followed, a subtle shift occurred on the base. Soldiers who had previously ignored her now nodded in greeting. The cooks gave her larger portions. Dr. Faisal found an excuse to check her blood pressure and whispered, That was the bravest thing I have ever seen." Aaliyah accepted these small kindnesses without comment, but she noticed them. She also noticed that Rohan was avoiding her. He would cross the street when he saw her coming. He stopped assigning her extra duties. It was as if he was trying to make her invisible, to pretend she did not exist. But Aaliyah knew that invisibility was a double-edged sword. It meant she could move freely. She began to document everything. Every rule Rohan had broken. Every instance of favoritism, corruption, and abuse. She collected statements from other soldiers, many of whom had suffered in silence for years. She did it quietly, carefully, like a spider weaving a web. She told no one, not even Dr. Faisal. The only person who knew was Private Kareem, who had become her unlikely ally. He was young and scared, but he had seen the truth, and he could not look away. "What are you planning, ma'am?" he asked one evening as they sat behind the generator shed. Aaliyah looked at the stars. "Justice," she said simply. "Slow, patient, boring justice. The kind that takes months and paperwork and testimony. The kind that outlasts any commander." Weeks passed. The base settled into an uneasy routine. There were no more confrontations. Rohan kept his distance, and Aaliyah kept her head down. But the video on Kareem's phone remained, a ticking clock that neither of them acknowledged. Then, one night, everything changed. A distress signal came in from a remote outpost 40 kilometers away. Insurgents had overrun the position. Soldiers were trapped. A rescue mission was needed immediately. Rohan, desperate to prove his leadership after the humiliation, decided to lead the mission himself. He ordered Aaliyah to stay behind and manage communications. "You are too valuable to risk," he said, but his eyes said something else. He wanted her out of the way. Aaliyah nodded and saluted, But as the armored convoy roared out of the base gates, she felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Something was wrong. The coordinates the commander had taken were based on outdated intelligence. She knew because she had seen the updated satellite images that morning. If Rohan followed the old route, he would drive his men straight into an ambush. She had a choice. She could say nothing, let the commander fail, and perhaps even die. That would solve her problem permanently. Or she could act. She looked at the silent radios, at the screens showing the convoy's progress. Then she picked up the handset. "See, Commander Rohan, this is Lieutenant Alia. Over." Static crackled. Then his voice cold and distant. "What is it, Lieutenant? I am busy." Alia took a deep breath. "Sir, your route is compromised. I have updated coordinates. You need to turn north at the dry riverbed. Repeat, turn north. Over." There was a long silence. She could almost hear him thinking, weighing his pride against his men's lives. Then a single word. "Confirmed." The convoy changed course. 40 minutes later, they arrived at the outpost from an unexpected direction, catching the insurgents by surprise. The rescue was a success. Not a single soldier was lost. As the sun rose over the base, the convoy returned. Rohan stepped out of his vehicle, covered in dust and grime. He looked at Alia, who was standing by the radio tent. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, the Commander Rohan did something no one had ever seen him do. He walked up to Alia, stood at attention, and saluted her. It was a slow, perfect salute. Alia returned it, and in that moment, the war between them ended. But the true story was only beginning. The salute that Commander Rohan gave Alia on the tarmac did not erase the past. It was, however, a crack in the wall of silence that had surrounded his behavior for years. Soldiers who had witnessed his cruelty began to feel something they had not felt in a long time. Hope. And hope, in a place like that base, was the most dangerous thing of all. In the days following the rescue mission, the atmosphere transformed slowly, like ice melting in a spring thaw. Rohan did not apologize. Men like him rarely did, but he stopped hissing insults. He stopped the petty punishments. He even once held a door open for Alia. It was a small gesture, but the soldiers noticed. They began to speak more freely in the mess hall, to share stories of past injustices that had been buried under years of fear. A young private named Hamid spoke of being forced to stand in the sun for 6 hours because he had accidentally used the commander's parking spot. A sergeant named Bilal recalled being punched in the stomach for questioning an illogical order. These were not isolated incidents. They were a pattern. Alia listened to all of it. She wrote nothing down, not yet. She simply let the stories flow, knowing that trust, once given, was fragile. She also began to notice something strange. Rohan was trying to change. He started attending morning briefings sober. He asked for Alia's opinion on tactical decisions, and something he had never done before. He even apologized in a clumsy, offhand way to Private Hamid. "I was too harsh," he muttered, not meeting the young man's eyes. It was not a full confession, but it was an acknowledgement. The other officers were divided. Some, like Captain Tariq, saw the change as genuine. "The man almost got his entire unit killed because of outdated maps," Tariq said to Alia in private. "You saved his life and his career. That changes a person." Others, like Lieutenant Farzana, the only other female officer on the base, were more skeptical. "He is not changing," Farzana warned. "He is adapting. There is a difference. He knows you have the video. He is trying to get ahead of the story." Alia considered both views. She was not naive, and she had seen too much cruelty in her short military career to believe in easy redemption, but she also believed in the possibility of growth. The question was whether Rohan's growth was real or simply a performance. She decided to test him. She requested a formal meeting in his office, a space she had avoided since the hair-pulling incident. He agreed immediately. When she walked in, she saw that his desk was cleaner than usual. There were no empty bottles in the trash. He even offered her tea, which she declined. "Commander," she began, "I have been collecting statements from soldiers about past abuses on this base. I have not shared them with anyone. I wanted to speak with you first." Rohan's face went pale, then red. His hands gripped the edge of his desk. For a terrible moment, Aliyah thought the old rage would return. But then, something remarkable happened. He took a deep breath. He let it out slowly, and he said, "Show me." Aliyah pulled out a folder from her bag. It was thin, but heavy with truth. She placed it on the desk. Rohan opened it. He read each statement in silence. His jaw tightened. His eyes glistened. When he finished, he closed the folder and pushed it back towards her. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. His voice was hoarse. Aliyah leaned forward. "I want you to write your own statement. I want you to admit what you did. I want you to request a transfer to a desk job where you cannot hurt anyone else. And I want you to do it voluntarily so that the soldiers who suffered under you can see that justice does not require a court-martial. It requires courage." Rohan stared at her for a long minute, and the only sound in the room was the hum of the air conditioner. Then he nodded. "Give me 3 days," he said. 3 days later, Commander Rohan submitted his official request for reassignment. In his letter, he did not make excuses. He did not blame the stress of war or the heat of the desert. He wrote simply, "I have failed the soldiers under my command. I have acted with cruelty and arrogance. I am not fit to lead. I request a position where I can no longer cause harm." The letter was brief, but it was enough. It was sent up the chain of command. The response came back within a week. Rohan was to be transferred to a logistics unit in a quiet northern city, far from the front lines. It was not a punishment exactly, but it was a removal. And on a base where everyone knew the truth, it felt like justice. The day Rohan left, there was no ceremony. He packed his bags in silence and loaded them into a jeep. A few soldiers came to watch, but no one waved. Aliyah stood at a distance, her arms crossed. Rohan saw her. He walked over, his boots heavy on the gravel. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Rohan said, "You should have let me drive into that ambush." Aliyah shook her head. "No, Commander. That is not who I am. I save lives, even the ones that don't deserve it." Rohan looked at the ground. "I don't understand you," he admitted. "I don't need you to understand me," Aliyah replied. "I just need you to remember this feeling, the feeling of being powerless. Maybe it will make you a better man." Rohan got into the jeep. The engine roared to life. As the vehicle pulled away, Aliyah saw him look back once, his face unreadable. Then he was gone, and a cloud of dust on a desert road. The base fell quiet. For the first time in years, the soldiers breathed easily. But Aliyah knew that the story was not over. A new commander was coming, and no one knew what he would be like. There was also the matter of the video on Private Kareem's phone. Aliyah had promised not to release it, but she had not promised to delete it. She thought about the power of that small piece of evidence, the way it had hung over Rohan's head like a sword. She decided to keep it, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. In war, people often talked about enemies and allies, about victories and defeats. But Aliyah had learned something different. She had learned that the greatest battles were not fought with guns or bombs. They were fought with silence and words, with patience and courage, and with the decision to save a man who had tried to destroy you. That was a kind of strength that no boot camp could teach. That night, she wrote another letter to her sister. "Something changed here today," she wrote. "Not the war. The war is the same, but the people are different. I am different. I used to think that being strong meant being hard. Now I think it means being soft in the right way, at the right time. Like water wearing down a stone. I don't know if I did the right thing, but I know I did the thing that let me sleep tonight." She sealed the letter and placed it in her bag. Outside her tent, the desert stretched to the horizon, endless and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Rohan was driving north, carrying his shame like a second shadow. And somewhere else, a new commander was preparing to take his place. And Aaliyah closed her eyes. She did not pray exactly, but she hoped. She hoped that the next battle would be easier. She also knew, deep down, that it would not be.